Hey Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew. I'm going to be a senior at Vandergrift High School next year. And competitive wise, I have participated in UIL Academics last year and also many different competitive programming competitions just online.
Okay, wow. All right. So have you had any experiences while doing those UIL competitions or competitive programming where you felt that maybe not in the moment, but looking back, maybe your mental state was keeping you from like reaching a certain goal?
Yeah, definitely. And this also happens just with like tests in school. I get nervous. Like, I think pretty much everyone gets nervous before these things, but sometimes you can get, or at least for me, I get nervous to an extent where I think that it affects my performance. And like, let's say there's a question that I'm not entirely sure on. If I'm really nervous, I can enter sort of like a panic mode where I'm not even thinking about the question anymore. I'm like changing my answer like 10 times and then not even thinking about why I would change it, just like, no, this is wrong, and just immediately go through it without thinking through anything. So, and then also just getting nervous before things in general, it's like your brain gets like cloudy and you can't think properly. So nerves and panic during, or like let's say I find a hard question on it, then I'll like freak out a little bit and stop thinking as well. So stuff like that definitely has affected me.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess yeah, you're right in that everybody has that. It's sort of that's sort of like the healthy stress that you want to boost you, like boost your performance. Like it's actually supposed to help you like be more attentive and pay attention to the task at hand, just so you perform better than if you were to just like be relaxed.
Chill.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and part of like having healthy stress shows that you actually care about what you're doing. So that part is good, but once it gets to the point where you're thinking more about the stress than the actual like thing at hand, that's the part that's dangerous because at that point I guess you care more about less than what actually the test like entails and more about like what is going to happen, which is like always something important to consider is like don't ask yourself what is going to happen, ask yourself what you're doing. Because when you ask yourself what you're doing, then you kind of force your mind to stay in this box of like what can only happen in the present and what actions can you actually take in that moment. And that's always like 90% of the time more productive than just wondering what's going to happen, because you can't really, the only way you can make like wondering what's going to happen productive is if you actually have an action in the present going towards that. But if you're just like speculating and wasting time, then that's not really doing anything. And so it might be like, for this goes for anything that I say like in these videos, it might be hard to think of all this in the moment just because that's sort of like a physical, you know, biomolecular reaction that goes off in the brain with the neurotransmitters and everything. But uh, trying to prepare your mindset beforehand to deal with those things always works best.
Yeah. So what you were saying about how it like it can be good, I completely agree. Like nerves are not necessarily a bad thing that will impact you if they're managed properly and if they're not like affecting you during whatever you're competing in. But what I'm talking about is like what you said basically. Once it gets to the point where you're more concerned about what might go wrong in trying to prevent that than actually just thinking about getting the questions right, that's when it starts impacting your performance. And the worst thing that like I've done this, which is bad, like this is how it's impacted me, is like during the test, if you start thinking about like how many am I going to miss? What's my score going to be? What do I have to do? That's like the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, because then you're wasting time. You're not even considering the question anymore. You've first of all, you've already accepted that you've failed. If you're thinking about how to recover, you've already accepted that it's over, which is bad from the beginning. And then also you're just wasting time. Like now you might have a greater chance to fail if you're thinking about how you can recover from it.
Yeah, exactly. Another analogy is like if you're trying to push a box and maybe it's a little too heavy for you, and you just keep thinking that it's too heavy, the box is not going to move at all. Like there's no way it can move. It's not just going to move on its own. The only way it can move, even if you can't physically, the only way it can move is if you try. And that's like the most important thing to realize, that that analogy applies to like anything where you have to put in effort to get closer to a goal. Nothing is going to happen if you keep thinking about if it's going to, you know, work out or not, if you're going to pass the test, if you're going to, et cetera, et cetera. But something is always going to happen if you actually put an effort towards it and work towards that goal.
Yeah.
So whenever I catch myself thinking of things like, am I going to have a better score? Am I going to have a better like time for rowing? Am I, you know, things like that. I say like, you know, what's the point in thinking of that when I can just put in the effort
Just
right
row.
now? Yeah, literally just row. And that like, that will automatically be much more productive than sitting there and staring out at the water. So yeah.
Yeah. It's putting 100% of your focus towards just the action of rowing, which will get you a better time instead of thinking like, what pace am I on, everything, all that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I covered this last time too. This doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't plan for the future, because planning and worrying are two different things. Planning for the future is setting a general course for the direction you want to go in the moment that you're in. And another thing is that can always change, because like we are always changing based on what's around us and what we learn and when we grow. And so it's okay to change your plans as you go on, just because it's not fair to keep yourself within a plan that you had when you weren't when you didn't grow as much, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just like, if you're trying to wear a shirt from when you were 5, like that doesn't work. Like you kind of need to change the shirt that you're going to wear. And so it's kind of this idea of basing your future off the present, if that makes sense, not off the past or what you think your future is, but sort of basing it off of what you can do now and what can lead as a result of what you do now, and realizing that you can't fairly judge what that will be, and that sometimes you won't, because it's kind of insane that people kind of think that they can perfectly predict what is an outcome of what they do, because there's like so much luck and chance involved.
Yeah.
And so you can set a goal, but that doesn't mean that's what you have to accomplish. In reality, when you set a goal, that's just giving you a sense of like motivation and a direction to work towards.
Yeah.
But in reality, what you're accomplishing and learning is the action of actually doing what, like that journey itself is what you accomplish.
Yeah.
And so that's like the important thing to realize when you set a goal, it's not necessarily it's
Something
sort
you
of like,
have to do.
yeah, it's not something you have to do, it's something that you put so you have something to like work towards.
Yeah.
Like that's like in rowing, it's like the how you steer the boat. Like if you don't have the steer, then you don't know where you're going, but you shouldn't be fully dependent on that steer, because you still need to row the boat, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And talking about setting goals, I think something that's beneficial to me at least is setting like immeasurably, impossibly high, like perfection goals. Like set a goal of absolute perfection. And it can sound unhealthy, like holding yourself to an unhealthy standard. But in my opinion, if you do it carefully, and like you said, you don't be sad if you don't reach the goal, like that's completely fine. Then I think that it's something that can just keep motivating you to try to improve and grow. So like let's say I'm going to take the SAT. I like make it my goal, like perfect score, 1600, no questions missed. And obviously I don't have 1600, like, but I'm still super happy with my score. Even though I didn't reach my goal, I understand that what I did get is like a very good score and I can be proud of it. But the point of having the goal super high is it's like that phrase, like if you shoot for the stars, you might end up on the moon. Like set your sights as high as possible and understand that even if you only get to the moon, like that's still amazing. You went to the moon. And but you still have in your mind the stars to motivate you to keep trying to improve always in life. Like there is no such thing. There's seriously, you can always improve. Like I don't like no matter who you are, you can always improve. So that's the idea of setting a really, really impossible goal.
Yeah, actually, like that's very true because when you set the highest goal, that doesn't mean you're, at least for me, like I sort of do what you do. Like when you set the highest goal, it doesn't necessarily mean this is what I'm expecting myself to do. It's just saying, I want to go on this path. And that doesn't necessarily have to end up where it is. It just gives you a way to want to do the best you can. Because when you give yourself, like, I don't know if there have been any studies or anything on this, maybe I should do one, but whenever you set yourself like a mediocre goal, I feel like you put in mediocre effort.
Yeah. Like if you think
But
it's easy, if you think your goal is easy to achieve, you're not going to work hard to achieve it.
yeah, exactly. But the trick comes in when at the end, when you're done with like whatever you're preparing for or something, the trick comes in realizing that that goal wasn't actually the set destination you were supposed to reach. That was just something to keep you moving. And you should be happy with wherever you ended up, because that's probably, in whatever you were facing at that time, that's probably the best that you could have done if you were truly passionate about what you were doing. And that's another thing. If you're passionate about what you do, then results kind of really don't matter, because you're kind of just grateful enough for being able to do what you did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so rather than caring about, I guess, what happens as a result of what you did, caring about what you actually did makes a huge difference. And especially for competitions, competition is only like one aspect of a certain thing, you know. So for example, for computer programming, that's not the only place where computer programming exists. Like there's actual jobs for computer programming and things like that, where it's not necessarily the fact that you got first at USACO that will make you the best at your job. It's the fact that you love what you're doing and you learn the most that you could, that will make you the best at your job.
Yeah. And another thing about it is like in life, you can do three things. You can look up, forwards, or down. And you should always, always, always look up, which means like you should always be growing. And what I mean like is seriously, even if you have accomplished all of your, like let's say that somehow you do accomplish your goals, you still look up. Like you should never be, it's not that you shouldn't be satisfied with what you have, you should always want to improve. So it's like you want to be happy with what you have, but also at the same time wanting to look up and improve, and never looking forwards, never being like, all right, I don't need to work anymore, I'm good, I'm done. And then definitely never looking down and intentionally trying to get worse.
Yeah, that's true. Because like truly, if you are done with life, that means the earth is perfect. And I guarantee you that won't be true. So
Yeah.
yeah, always looking up, but being happy with where you are, because like wherever you are now, that's, you have worked to get that spot. And like that's just how it is. Like that's just where you are now. And you can want to improve, but you shouldn't, like, you shouldn't denounce yourself for where you are now just because of where you want to be. You should be happy with where you are now, because you have to recognize that you have put in the effort to be where you are now. Just because you're not as high as maybe you want to be, or the goals that you set, doesn't mean that you didn't put in any effort or work to get where you are. And if you made some mistakes or anything along the way, and maybe that's why you're not as high as you are now, there's nothing you can do about those mistakes that will be productive except learn from them and make sure to do them when the time comes again.
Yeah.
And so again, being happy with where you are now because you work to get to that place, and recognizing that working more to get to a higher place is really the only thing you can do to get to a higher place. And so if you want to get to that position, then you know what to do. You have to, like you said, you have to improve more, you have to look up, and you have to work towards that. But to be honest, just like sitting there and wishing that you are going to get to that spot and then complaining about your position now isn't really going to get you anywhere. But actually putting in the effort towards that and looking up towards that is good. And you can be satisfied with where you are now and want to improve. Because if you're saying you're satisfied with how you are now, that just means you're grateful for what you have. But you can recognize that more can be done if you put in the work.
Yeah.
But you can still be happy with what you have. It's kind of, in the end, it's kind of like a trade-off because you're having to put in the effort and energy to work, which is kind of like, I guess you can put it as like negative. And then when you get the reward for that, it's sort of positive. So if you're already satisfied with what you have, then it kind of balances out after you do all of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you want to talk about strategies for managing like nerves and panic during competitions?
Yeah, sure. Just one thing I want to say that I realized while I was saying that if you're not satisfied with how you are now, then you'll never be satisfied no matter what you have, even if you have like a $40 million mansion, like 10 Lamborghinis and like 5 pools, it doesn't matter because like what I just said, if you don't have satisfaction now, you're still gonna have to get in the work to get that all those things that I just said. You're still gonna have to put in work that those are not just gonna pop up nowhere. And so you're still putting in that sort of negative energy and then you're getting a positive reward. So those balance out. And what you're left with is still your state of not being satisfied. So, but if you're satisfied, you'll be satisfied with anything.
And
Because,
I
yeah,
continue.
yeah, because like whenever you want to get something, you're going to have to put in work to do it. And by the time you gain that reward, the work that you have put in to gain that reward, most like in a normal, I'm considering this to be like a normal situation with like no cheating or bribery or things like that. But usually the work that you put in is equal to the reward that you get. And so those always cancel out. And what's left is your internal satisfaction for what you have.
Yeah. And also what you were saying about how if you have to do a lot of hard work, that's a negative, and then the reward is the positive. So if you're not satisfied, it will just cancel out. I think that also goes to show that you should always be working on something that you're passionate about. Because if you have passion for it, the work won't be a negative. It will be a positive,
Yeah,
and you'll enjoy just the act of getting better at it.
yeah, exactly. I treat work as like the actual work. And then for reward, that includes like external things like money and trophies and things like that. And also just the satisfaction and pleasure from doing that work. And so if you're passionate about it, then that will sort of go back to add back to your satisfaction.
Yeah.
So yeah. All
So
right.
for the nerves, you want to start that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I was gonna say something I do before anything I'm doing if I'm nervous is breathing. And people like this gets thrown around a lot, but for me at least, it like seriously works. Like, because one of the things that happens when you get nervous, like scientifically, is your breathing gets irregular. It's like faster and stuff like that. If you have like a panic attack, then it's completely out of control. So what I do is I make a conscious effort to take back control of my breathing. And with that, you will also, like in the same moment, if you just focus everything, think about nothing else except your breathing, you're taking your mind off of any nerves or anything that you might have. And at the same time, you're taking back control, like mentally, of the mental battle that's happening. So before everything, I just just slow breathe in, breathe out every time. And also I think that scientifically, like slow breathing lowers your heart rate and relaxes you. So it's like 3 really great benefits from just making sure to take time and slow breathe in, slow breathe out, relax.
Yeah, I do that too. If I'm gonna be honest with you, like I'll like in the spelling bee and GOB when I was on the stage, I had like a bunch of butterflies in my stomach, but then I would like take a bunch of deep breaths and I was fine. So yeah, breathing is definitely a very important aspect of controlling your nerves from, panicking and then doing what you were describing, like just not even thinking about the question and just choosing random answer choices and crossing them out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the other thing that I do, I have a story for it. So I went to something called Boys State a few weeks ago, which is basically, let's say you basically are divided into groups of 500 people and you have to elect like leaders amongst those 500 people. And it's a government basically, but that's not that important. So pretty much at 3 different levels, I had to give speeches, and around 10 people give a speech and only one of the 10 like moves on to the next level to then give a speech with the other people that won at the other levels. And you just go up and up and up all the way to the top. And so the first 2 times that I gave my speeches, I was like super stressed, nervous, everything, stumbling over my words, all that stuff, and that was even with the breathing and stuff, just because I was really, really nervous. And I knew that it was like, I only have one chance. There's so many people. What am I going to do? And it went okay, but I definitely could have done better. And for the third speech, that was like the final one, something that helped me a lot was like completely not even thinking about it at all, like not even practicing I practiced obviously, not like practicing right up to the last minute, not studying, not revising it at all, just for like the last 5 minutes before it was my turn to go, just not even listening to the other speeches, just completely take my mind off it entirely and like almost like pretend that I didn't care, because you're only nervous about things that you really care about. So by like pretending like, yeah, no, it's no big deal, I'm just gonna go do this, like I was like super, and for that speech I was super relaxed, and I think I gave a much better speech. So it was basically pretending that it didn't really matter and I just didn't really care about it, and just be like, yeah, I mean, I don't care. I thought I did so much better. And obviously I did care, but it's like tricking myself. Obviously when you still want to put in the same preparation so the quality of work doesn't go down, but in the moment before, just pretending that you don't care about the outcome and still doing your best helped me a lot.
Yeah. And about that, like studying the last minute before actually literally doesn't help, because I know like in the spelling bee finals that day, we were looking over a word list and one of the kids got a word wrong that we were literally like looking over. So in that moment, like it's important to control your nerves, because his nerves were probably so high that he didn't even realize that he studied that word,
Yeah.
and like he probably forgot it. So yeah. And I actually have a funny story about that too. Before UIL spelling, I literally watched one of the animated Justice League movies, and
Yeah,
I
it's
I
seriously is
got
good. Yeah.
gold. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I did that. Like I was like, I put in all the work I could until now, and all I can do now is just do whatever they tell me to. And so just like chilling now and keeping my mind off of it, because just worrying about it will absolutely give me nothing. And another thing that like giving your mind a little bit of gap before that like really stressful event, what that does is it gives you a better like, I guess it gives you a better like recollection way or something like that, where it's like if you're tensed all the time, then you're not really remembering anything because you're so tense. And it's like you know but when you chill your mind, then it's like you have this empty gap in the moment before, and then during the competition things are slowly coming to you back
Yeah.
again, and it's like chill, it's not like Pepe meltdown, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's also like you could think of it like a sport. Like in a sport, let's say you're running a marathon, you rest the day before. Like you don't run a mile the
Yeah.
day before. before, because then you'll be tired for the marathon. Like you got to give your brain a
Yeah,
rest and some
exactly.
time to chill out. Yeah.
Exactly. Like even 5 minutes there, I guess you can warm up because you need to warm up, but like,
Yeah.
warm up is just like slightly reviewing things and like last, those things, but it's not like cramming the entire like speech, like you said, cramming the entire speech. It's kind of just going over like the key ideas and points to make sure you don't like forget the entire speech, but it's not memorizing every single word in like the last 5 minutes. So, yeah. All right. Anything else?
I don't have anything else to add.
All right. I think that should be it. Thanks, Andrew.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Bye. See ya.